Game 3 podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. Bryce SImon is here with me, as you can see. Today, we're going to dive deep into Scottie Barnes, his injury, and what the Toronto Raptors season looks like to this point. We're going to talk a little bit about Zion Williamson, and then we're going to do a quick little NBA trade deadline recap to this point after a month of games. And finally, we're going to talk a little bit about Robert Dillingham and the Kentucky Wildcats again.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Way downtown.
Bang! Bang! What is this going to be? Wow! Are you kidding me?
Hello and welcome to the Game 3 podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. But if you watch the tape, what you will see completely orchestrated this game. Bryce, Dave's going to yell at me because I screwed up the whole intro section there video-wise. I'm excited for him to let me know.
You took my comment. You took my comment. As soon as you brought me in, I was going to say, Sam, Dave's going to be mad at you because you didn't do that the way you were supposed to. You know what's funny? That intro makes me smile. Like, you turn on the intro and I just start smiling every time. One, the Steph Curry clip literally is like one of my favorite moments. And I remember exactly where I was sitting when he made that shot. So it just there's like some nostalgia around that one. We've talked about the Kai Jones thing, all of that. By the way, have you seen the Warriors Celtics score as we are recording this? The game started. I went on a walk with my wife and our best friend's twin boys. We went on a walk and our littlest was riding his bike. I walked back in and they were down 40 at halftime. It was like 82-38 at halftime. And I was like, what happened? That it must have been the craziest second quarter of the season.
So, look, the first quarter was 44-22. The second quarter was 38-16. So it was just like a double dip at 22, basically.
Well, the end of the first quarter must have got crazy because I feel like the Warriors were down like 5 when I left, and it may not have been mid first yet, but I was like, that can't be right. I saw 82-38 and I'm like, man, I wonder what those numbers are because they're definitely not the score.
Oh my goodness. The Celtics have gone 20 for 36 from 3.
Kristaps isn't even playing.
No. Tatum's 4 for 5. Jaylen Brown's 5 for 10. Derek White's 4 for 5. Sam Hauser's 3 for 7. Like they're just like out here just shooting them out of the gym.
Draymond wasn't guarding Jaylen to start the game. He was playing off of him, daring him to shoot. And I think he missed his first few, but he must have got it going after that, obviously.
Yeah, and then Steph is 0 for 9 from 3. It's just one of those days, it looks like, in terms of what's going on. Jesus. So we're not going to talk about that game much because I have not watched that game. We're going to start here with the news that Scottie Barnes is seemingly going to miss quite a bit of time. The news coming out of Toronto is I believe it's a fractured hand, right? Yeah. Fractured, left hand, where they have a lot of options on the table, be it, potentially getting surgery, not getting surgery. If he doesn't get surgery, there's a chance he comes back. If he does get surgery, he will miss the rest of the season. I don't know about you, given that they're, as far under 500 as they are. I think they're 22-38 right now. I'm kind of assuming this is basically going to be like an end of season deal. Maybe I'm wrong about that. That comes from no reporting. That's just me speculating, seeing where the tea leaves are going. I think it's pretty reasonable to say he's going to miss a substantial amount of time. And if Scottie's out, this team's going to fall off a cliff probably. So I assume that they'll kind of rest him moving forward, but that's where the player participation policy could come into play, where it's like, well, he obviously has this injury, but what if he's healthy enough to play? He's off an all-star now, so he is subject to the player participation policy in a pretty substantial way. I'm fascinated to see where that aspect of it goes, but more than anything, I kind of just wanted to do like a post-mortem almost, even though Scottie's obviously still with us, of what his season looked like this year, because I thought Scottie was incredible to start the season, and then it felt like it kind of dropped off a little bit to me after a certain point. His entire season numbers, if you go through them, he's averaging 18 or 19.9 points, 8.2 rebounds, 6.1 assists, 47.5% from the field, 34% from three. If you look at the true shooting percentage, it's like very slightly below league average. If he doesn't play again this season, that means he'll have 3 seasons out of 3 now where he's been below league average in true shooting percentage again. I don't know what to do with this Scottie Barnes season. I think it's obviously a step forward. My question is for you, how massive of a step forward do you think it was?
Yeah, so I was really high on Scottie Barnes' season. And then right before we started recording, I kind of just looking at the season in totality. And then I'm not going to steal the numbers from you because I know you have them handy. You were kind of giving me the quite large sample size of his shooting percentages here leading up to the injury. And it gave me a little bit of pause. Now, one thing I will say, I really enjoy watching Scottie Barnes defensively. I know a lot of our conversation is going to revolve around what he is offensively, Sam. I get that. But I like he's one of the, you always hear him when you listen to a broadcast, him and the Orlando Magic assistant coaches. If you watch an Orlando Magic game, turn the volume up and listen to those dudes yelling out schemes and coverages and advice and all of that. But I like listening to Scottie talk. I appreciate that a lot. The more I get into this world, the more I appreciate those things. I think he's a really good off-ball help defender, those type of things. Offensively, I kind of like put the ball in his hands, let him make plays, put the team around him that makes sense to do that. I think what kind of stinks the most with this injury, and I think everybody knows this, is we're not going to get to see it now in a large sample size of game. We got quite a few games, I guess, with RJ and IQ, but would have liked to see more with those guys around him, Scottie being the primary creator and what he can do in those situations. But again, not to steal your shine here, but if he can't shoot it, even if the ball's in his hands more, that's going to be a little bit of an issue. And just real quick, some context, the Raptors are 4 games out of 10th, which is the Hawks right now as we record, and the Nets are between them and the Hawks, 2 games up on the Raptors. So, I mean, you would think that they would fall back even further from that, even if Scottie could get back for some amount of games.
So, unfortunately, I think that we are back to where it's always been with Scottie. The rest of Scottie's game has translated in an unbelievable way. He is, they transitioned him to more of like a free safety role defensively this year than what we'd seen previously.
Yep.
He's transitioned really, really well in that regard. Like you mentioned, communication's always there. The defensive playmaking, especially early this year, was utterly outstanding. I loved what we saw from him, running the chance and running a little bit more of the point early on, being more of Toronto's primary decision maker. I did a whole video on Scottie Barnes's early season stuff. You can go through my YouTube channel and you can find that. I loved everything that we saw. But the entire thing with Scottie Barnes has always been, is he going to shoot? And over Scottie Barnes's first 35 games this season, he averaged 21 points per game, 8.9 rebounds per game, 5.8 assists per game, 1.5 steals, 1.4 blocks, shot 48, 39, 78. Over the final 25 games of his season, he averaged 18.3 points, 7.2 rebounds, 6.4 assists. So counting numbers didn't really change. The turnover numbers went up to 3.2 per game. I will note generally, I don't know how much this totally lines up with the reality necessarily, but just from watching Raptors games, it does feel like the turnover number has gone up since the Siakam trade, where he's just like a little bit more responsible for everything that's going on. He gets much more attention. So I don't want to put too much of an emphasis on this, but the turnover number has jumped from like 2.4 or so in the first 35 games up to 3.2 over the course of those 25 games recently. But in those games, he's shooting 46% from the field, 24% from three, 78% from the line. If you just look, last 18 games, Scottie Barnes shooting 22.6% from three. Last 25 games, 24% from three. Last 30 games, 26% from three. Essentially, we have a 30-game sample of him being a 40% 3-point shooter this year, and a 30-game sample of him being a 26% 3-point shooter this year, which means we're back at the place where Scottie Barnes, how he shoots the ball is going to tell the tale of what his ceiling is. And I thought, and I want to be clear here, I think the shooting has genuinely improved. I don't think anymore that like he's a non-shooter at this point. That's where I feel like we're at with Scottie.
Sure.
His confidence level is much better. The free throw percentage is much better. I feel quite positive generally about the direction this is going for Scottie in terms of the shooting. Having said that, we now have this 30-game sample of him shooting 26% from three, coming off of last season where, you know, really, really struggled to shoot the ball, shot 28% from three, shot 30% from three his rookie year. Based off of the largest sample of what we have so far, so 2.5 years, or maybe 2 years, because he started really well as a rookie as well. I think for his first like 20 or 30 games. We have these really inconsistent samples now that by and large still say that the shooting is a problem. But we've seen like hot stretches and we've seen improvement that says maybe he can be a shooter at some point. Where do you fall on this? Because to me, it's always been, will Scottie shoot or won't he shoot? I like the improvement we've seen, but it's hard to really tell where all of this is going to land, I think.
My vibe is I look at the 34% on 4.9 attempts for the 60-game sample this year, and I think I'm willing to buy into that a little bit, even in the terms of maybe it's streaky, Sam, right? We see players like this where they're 34, 35, maybe one year they're 32, but the next year they're 36.5, and it's because you know, they had a 5-game stretch where they really shot it or something like that. So I don't think he's going to be a consistent whatever it is, but I think 34, 35%. And in the archetype and role that I think we're talking about him in now, I think that that's doable. I think that's where I'm trying to get is, okay, Scottie Barnes, primary initiator, right? Offensive hub, however you want to explain it. Well, what's the ceiling for that team? How perfectly do you have to build that team around him? How good of a creator is Scottie Barnes? How much of a mismatch does that cause other teams? And then depending on how good he is at that, depends on how good he has to be knocking down shots as well. And so that's what's interesting. You know, ideally you can run him some pick and roll, right? Like you can do some creative things with Scottie with the ball, somebody else setting a ball screen. But if they can just go under the ball screen, we've talked about this with other guys before, then it's not as effective. So I think that's what I'm trying to hash out is what's his overall archetype? What's the percentage of time, Sam, he spends on the ball versus off the ball? Because as that off the ball percentage goes up, the efficiency in which he shoots the three has to go up with that as well.
Yeah, and look, here's the positive thing with Scottie. Over the large sample of the season to this point, Scottie's shot 38% on his catch and shoot threes. He shot 41.7% on his unguarded catch and shoot threes.
Yep.
But he's made 19% of his pull-up threes. And it's not like he's taken a ton of those. Like he takes like 2 pull-up threes per game. He took 58 of them this season and made 19% of them versus 237 catch and shoot threes. So it's still not like a large piece of his repertoire, but he's really bad at it. The other piece of it is he took like close to 1 pull-up 3-pointer per game last season. He made them at 19.6%. So like the pull-up 3-point game is still a big deficiency for Scottie Barnes. That's kind of the reality of where his game is at this point. And what the Raptors need to figure out is, to me, to be a legitimate number one in the NBA, you unequivocally need to be able to be like a real pull-up 3-point shooter or like a devastating pull-up mid-range shooter. Scottie this year, took 105 pull-up 2-point shots this year. So right around 2 per game. I'm sorry, he took 1 per game, 1 pull-up 3 per game this year. I think I said 2 a second ago. Took right around 2 pull-up 2-point shots per game this year. Made them at 40%, which isn't quite high enough, but it's enough of a piece of growth to where if you squint, you can be like, okay, this is a real thing. And the reason why this matters is, as one of the people in the YouTube comments asks, no matter what, Scottie Barnes gets a max extension this offseason, 100%. Like, they're maxing Scottie Barnes. Everything that they have done over the course of this season
says that, yeah.
Trading Pascal Siakam for the package that they did, trading OG Anunoby for RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickly, who are more on Scottie's age timeline than like rookies would be, right? That says to me they're building around Scottie Barnes, which means they have to max him this summer. That's just where you have to go with this at the end of the day. So it's really interesting to try and determine how Toronto builds around this, because we still don't have clarity on if Scottie Barnes is going to be a number one option, but they're going to have to pay him a 25% max here, probably with language that says if he takes the leap, to all NBA, that he'll be getting, super max language. So going up to 30%. He's nowhere near the all NBA conversation this year. I mean, he won't even be eligible if he doesn't play 5 more games the rest of the year. I would be surprised if he would end up all NBA, to be honest with you, next year, even given where his game is. There's a chance that if the pull-up shooting really comes along this offseason, he could do it. But the all-NBA guys, they're like genuine creators now. The league is more talented than ever in terms of those types of players. I think it's going to be a little bit difficult for Scottie to take that leap in a year, but I'm just like really intrigued by where all this goes, I guess is where I'm at.
So when you say number one option, Sam, do you think Scottie could be, quote unquote, the best player on, let's just say, a playoff team, like a legit playoff, like deep run contender? I hate saying championship. Let me finish real quick. Or can he be the best player and someone else be the best scorer, I guess is my question. I know I always do, like I've always said, I think Cade Cunningham will be the best player on a team, but he may need somebody else to be the leading scorer, right? Like somebody else that averages 28 a game, but Cade averages 25 and 8 rebounds and 8 assists and all of these other things. I may end up being wrong on that. What do you think with Scottie in terms of this? Like, can he be the best player, but Quickly is actually the guy that goes and gets you 25 a night if he takes that next leap in his game?
I think where we're at in the NBA now is that you need your best player to be able to be that guy at the end of the game.
Sure.
Okay. Because the guys that you're going against, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Luka, Jokic, etc., right? They're going to do that.
Yeah.
And look, you can come up with all sorts of different team constructions. You can come up with X, Y, and Z. But the other piece of it is trying to find another guy that is as good as Scottie that can be that primary scorer, right? Unfortunately, once you start having to pay Emmanuel Quickly, like they're going to have to this summer.
Yeah.
Once you already have RJ Barrett under for $26 million, you pay Scottie Barnes a max now. You have Jakob Poeltl for $20 million. Those costs start to add up and stack up pretty quickly. No pun intended. So it's a little bit more difficult, I think, to do that. I would imagine that their operating procedure is going to be, they're going to try and use these picks that they have. I think they hope probably that the Spurs pick transfers this year so that they can use the picks they have, use the other things that they have, the picks they got from the Pacers, Ochai Agbaji, whatever he's worth, etc., and try and go get a star to grow with Scottie is my guess, because otherwise it's going to be hard to get into the top 5 of the draft probably, unless you win lottery odds. And then it's also going to be difficult to hit another star at 18, 16, 12, whatever pick you have, right? So it's interesting. It's really, really interesting to see where they go. And look, this is a weird roster construction for Toronto. Like, I probably would have gone about it differently. Like, I wouldn't have taken the Quickly Barrett deal. As much as I love Quickly and really enjoyed the idea of them getting him and having him grow with Scottie, I just thought that taking the Barrett contract also probably created some issues for them long term when you, in addition, have to pay Emmanuel Quickly $25 to $30 million this summer, which I'm assuming is what the number is going to be, probably 25.
I will say then I have some reservations still, and I'm not resolute either way, in Scottie Barnes being the leading scorer and being able to get buckets at the way you would need to go like really win in the playoffs. I guess that would be my answer. Is I don't think we have that answer because of a lot of the numbers you gave in terms of, I think you have to be able to score with the ball in your hands in a pretty efficient way to do that. And all the pull-up shooting numbers right now don't say that Scottie can do that. I'm not saying he won't get there, right? Like he works on his game, and with his size and his strength, he can get to his spots. Like, I don't think it's going to be about getting to his spots. I would feel more comfortable if you told me Scottie was the best all-around player on a team, but you have a 25 to 30 point a game star next to him that's getting the clutch buckets, the, those half court isolation buckets, those type of things.
And I know I'm going to get thrashed if people go back and listen, because I liked the Anunoby deal for both teams at the time. That doesn't mean it's the one that I would have done necessarily if I was in charge of like the Raptors, which I'm not. And, Raptors fans should probably be happy about that. But like, I think I wouldn't have wanted all the cap,
sure,
money on the books that they're going to have moving forward with Scottie. I think I would have rather had a restart, even though I love the fit of Quickly with Scottie still and understood why they kind of went about it that way. Here's kind of the final point that I'll ask you. How good do you think the player has to be with Scottie Barnes in UBA title contender? Like, do they have is Scottie their franchise guy, or is it that they need a legitimate Shai Gilgeous-Alexander level player to be able to take the next step?
I don't know if I would go Shai. This is an NBA, and I know some people are going to really push back. Basketball Genesis said, what are some teams where the best player isn't the best scorer? And that's interesting. Like, this whole conversation has me.
I mean, the Lakers right now, I would argue.
Okay.
Anthony Davis. I think AD's been their best player this year.
But they're in 10th right now. And so that's what I'm trying to think, title contender. I think I'm like Christian said, they need to pair him with an elite score. So whatever an elite score means. And I love Emmanuel Quickly. Maybe there is that jump. I think it has to be somebody that scores the ball at a higher, that is a better score than Emmanuel Quickly, I would say. And so I think that's what he would need. I think he needs that, a wing guard, big time scorer who maybe doesn't have to be that great defensively, Sam, because Scottie does so much on that end, and you can build the other. But I think you need a big time, all-star level bucket getter.
This is actually a great question, because if you really go through it, it's kind of hard to say. The Celtics, Tatum's their best scorer, or is their best player. Cavs, Mitchell's their best player and best scorer. The Bucks, Giannis is their best player and best scorer. The Knicks, Brunson is their best player and best scorer.
Embiid.
The Sixers, Embiid, both. The Heat, Jimmy Butler, I would argue both. Orlando Magic, Paulo, both. The Indiana Pacers may be a case where I guess you could say Tyrese might not be their best scorer. You could maybe say Pascal Siakam is their best scorer now, but I don't know if I agree with that. Even Halliburton can really go score, and Tyrese has fallen off a cliff a little bit since the hamstring injury, and maybe we should talk about that later this week. But it's interesting kind of looking through the playoff teams right now, Minnesota, I would say Ant has been their best player this year, although Gobert probably has a case. Oklahoma City, Shea, Denver, Jokic, the Clippers, Kawhi, the Pelicans, Zion, and Brandon Ingram, both of whom can go score.
It's really close
like,
too.
Yeah, like Sacramento, maybe Sacramento with Sabonis, but I would say Fox is better.
So the Pelicans are close because Ingram almost averages more than Zion. We're about to talk about that. And then Sacramento, I think a lot of people would push back, but I think you would have some people with Sabonis, just the double doubles, the triple doubles, how much the offense runs through him.
So like even in like Phoenix's case and and the Pelicans case, right? Both of those guys are really, really like high level scorers. I would say both Brandon Ingram and Zion are ahead of Scottie as scorers, like point blank. I would say Zion is like a better player than Scottie Barnes now, based off of what we've seen to this point.
When he's healthy, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and we'll see if that changes as Scottie grows and gets older and everything. But Dallas, Luka, Golden State, Steph, the Lakers, as we mentioned, like you can say AD might not be their best, scorer, but is their best player. The best teams, their best player tends to be the best scorer on their team. So it's going to be tricky to me, I think, to make that, archetype of team building situation work. But it's kind of where I'm at on the Scottie Barnes situation right now.
I guess I would leave it with, then they need to go get, like, maybe he's the number 2, right? Like, and people will take that as blasphemy and Scottie hate and all. Like, I like Scottie Barnes. I've liked his game. I've tweeted out positive things about him. I've taken hate from Pistons fans because I've been so positive about Scottie Barnes' season. It's not Scottie Barnes hate. I think it's just the fact of team building and kind of how we ran that down. I will say, I talked to my guy Esfandiar Baharini. He follows the Raptors. He said the one thing that will be interesting here throughout the season is, like, Quickly is going to be put in this role to see how much he can create for his teammate. So, like, there is never something crazy positive about a young player missing this many games. But the one instance here is, what can Quickly do in this role? And can you learn something from that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Okay. We're going to have some fun now. We're going to talk about Zion Williamson. Zion Williamson has been one of my favorite players in the NBA to watch, probably for the last month, because they've really embraced this point Zion ideal where they're getting super creative. I want to shout out Willie Green. I think Willie Green has taken a lot of, this is something that I've talked about on the show for years upon years, basically since Stan Van Gundy was there. And you got super creative, like playing Zion at point, running these like super fun ghost actions when JJ Redick was there, and then spacing out, to the top of the key, spacing out like empty side actions where JJ would like be at the wing and Zion would get downhill and do stuff. But I also kind of want to talk about like some of the growth Zion is showing, because I did a video on Zion Williamson earlier this year, and that was like a weird Christopher Walken like emphasis on those words, Zion Williamson. That was bad, but Zion Williamson this year has shown growth in ways that we haven't seen before. I've seen some people say that like the athleticism is back. I don't really completely agree with that. I think it looks better from like the point where I did the video, I think in like November or early December or so, where I thought like the bounce was like not there at all. And like, it was not quite where he needed it to be. It's back insofar as like, it's at a functional level for where he needs it to his game. But what I love about watching Zion now is I think that the patience just looks so much better in terms of how he like operates on the ball and is able to create and get his teammates involved. He looks very comfortable and poised running the show of an offense now. He's never going to be some like elite level passer, but he's been pretty damn good running their show. And we have some clips. We're going to talk about some clips both on offense and on defense for Zion that kind of showcase where he's at. And I don't want to shortchange the defense. I think the defense has been a little bit better recently. Where are you at on this Zion situation?
No, I love that this is what they're doing with him. I have, early in the year, I watched the game and I was like, he's a monster. He is amazing. All the things everybody knows about him. but I just didn't really love the way they were using him. And I had some questions about building a team around him and that archetype of player. And it was funny because even in these notes, I said, man, I really love this Zion and Valanciunas pick and roll. Like, it's just so tough to play against, to prepare for. I like some of his passing and all of that. And then we get to a couple months later and they've kind of dove right into the reason I like it is I think it fits their team roster really well, Sam. I've been saying for a while, I like CJ McCollum playing off the ball, like as a spot up player. And if you just go through the roster, Brandon Ingram, like that's not as much, right? Like that's a whole conversation. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that. CJ's 43% from 3 on 8 attempts this year. Murphy, 36% on 7.5. Herb, who we got some hate for not putting in our top 10 list last episode, 43% on 3.5 attempts. Jordan Hawkins, we know, even if Matt Ryan's on the floor. Jose Alvarado, 36%. Najee Marsh. So my point being, you have all of these guys who can play off the ball, knock down, catch, and shoot, and who maybe their strength, other than BI, isn't creating and running the offense through them. And then Valanciunas in the post. I'm like, it kind of makes more sense this way than like CJ trying to run pick and roll with Valanciunas. And then, yeah, Zion in the dunker spot is cool, but I would rather just put the ball in his hands and make the defense figure that crap out. Like, have fun defending that stuff with 3 shooters spacing the floor.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Or like defending with, running these crazy 4-5 ball screens with Zion and Jonas, like you're kind of saying, or running, 4-1 screens with Zion and CJ, like 4-2 screens with Zion and like Trey Murphy, like sort of kind of playing the 2 even a little bit when Brandon's at the 3. It just gives you a lot more room for creativity offensively,
Yes.
I think,
Yes.
which is really important for what the Pelicans, I think, need in order to derive the best offense for them. So in his last 30 games, Zion Williamson's averaging 22.6 points, 5.5 rebounds, 5.2 assists per game, shooting 57.7% from the field. In his last 18, 23.7 points per game, 4.8 rebounds, 5.8 assists. Since the start of February, when the point guard switch like really happened, I think it was like first week of February or so when I really started to like notice it as a thing. 23.9 points, 5.6 rebounds, 6.5 assists, 53.4% from the field, getting to the line 7 times per game, making 75% of his free throws. I think that this is just the way that they have to operate. And I think that more than anything, it's the best way to make the Zion Brandon Ingram combo work. I think it's very difficult to have 2 guys that are questionable shooters on the wing playing, the 3 and the 4 when they're both like off ball scorers in some way, shape, or form. Realistically, you need one of those 2 guys constantly on the ball. And for me, like Zion's just a better player than Brandon. Apologies to Brandon Ingram. I think people know I've really enjoyed Brandon for a long, long time. And I don't mean that negatively. It's just that when Zion's at his best, it's a totally different ball game. And for me, what I've enjoyed, again, kind of seeing most is the patience that he's played with. I kind of mentioned that at the top here, and I want to talk about that as we dive into some clips here. What I see here when I watch the Pelicans is you're going to see this is one of those really fun 4-1 ball screen actions, right? Where CJ McCollum is coming up and setting a screen. Zion, look at the way Naz Reid plays this, right? Like Naz almost like tries to get in between CJ and Zion here and gives up Zion's left hand. And like, that's just like a total no, right? Like that is the worst way to defend Zion. But look at this.
Sorry, the thing behind this, Sam, is when does Naz Reid have to do this? Like, when is Naz Reid practicing and how many games is he guarding? He's guarding, for those not watching on YouTube, he's guarding Zion 40 feet from the basket and having to guard a ball screen that you can't switch because it's CJ McCollum setting the screen. And so it puts him in a tough spot that he's not familiar with.
As the ball screen ball handler defender, not the big defender.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I should have clarified. Yeah.
No, you did a better job than I did. Okay. So, but it gives up Zion's left hand 2 years ago, 3 years ago, right? Even last year. Zion's just going to try and get downhill here, I think.
Yeah,
Even
I
with
agree.
Karl Towns and Kyle Anderson, I believe that is, there waiting. He's just going to try and get downhill and go. But look at how he takes that little pound dribble right at the top of the key there. He stops, he pauses, and he looks up. He tries to see what's going on. He sees that he's got this 1-on-2 on the backside here because Kyle Anderson has stepped up to cut off his drive. And he's going to have this man wide open here in the corner, and he's going to shoot it over to the corner, drills the three. It's the patience. It's this little pound dribble right here where he stops instead of going all the way to the rim. That is real, genuine growth from Zion Williamson as a player. Zion's always been a good passer in terms of seeing the court and everything. It's that willingness to play patiently and allow his game to really, really develop and allow the defense to make its move on him and then react to what the defense does to him. He doesn't always have to be the dominant at the rim brick shithouse scorer. He can just go and make plays. He's skilled enough to do that.
Who's in this? Who's in the dunker? Is that Dyson?
I'm assuming that's Dyson pre-injury. Yeah.
So here's the thing. The reason I ask is this isn't even the best possible lineup you could have around him. I mean, it is Alvarado, who I really like. Jose Alvarado's game one. It's just absolutely fun to watch. But you have Dyson Daniels in the short corner. I believe that's Larry Nance kind of playing in the mid-range on what turns into the strong side as he comes down. Point being, it's not even as spaced as what it could be depending on who you have on the floor, because you have Nance and Daniels out there, and he still creates a pretty, not wide open, but very quality corner catch and shoot three for a very good catch and shoot player in Jose Alvarado. It's just, it's awesome.
100%. I think that's the biggest place where I've seen growth in Zion offensively. Again, I don't think that the burst or the bounce or anything like that is really back. When I watch him, I still think that you look at that second year, you look at Duke. I mean, my God, he was a different guy, but it's clear that he's getting in better condition. It's clear that he's getting in better shape, and things are starting to get better. He's starting to grow and mature and figure out how to use his skill level and use his inherent basketball IQ, which I think has always been really underrated. Zion hasn't just been this brick wall and enormous driving force. He's always been very skilled as a basketball player and is able to get to his spots with that skill and with that handle and with the power, obviously, but using the kind of influx of all of those skills together, the intersection of all of those skills at once to be able to get to where he wants. Now we're starting to see it more in a way that allows him to impact winning across the board.
Yeah. I mean, sorry, go ahead. I love the growth.
I love the growth, but I also want to talk about the defense because this is where we start getting into the impacting winning piece of it for Zion. And I think we've seen some real genuine growth this year defensively from Zion. It's the activity and the IQ and the willingness to have his brain switched on and not just shut off on defense to me. Right. So this play here, what you're going to see, same game, right? Zion is in that weak side corner in what is turning into an empty side action between Jaden McDaniels. No, it's not Jaden McDaniels. Who is that? And Anthony Edwards. That's Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Anthony Edwards.
Yeah.
So it's essentially a 2-1 ball screen with the personnel that they have out there.
Yep.
Into an empty side where CJ McCollum is going to be responsible for slowing down the freight train that is Anthony Edwards by himself on the empty side of a court. What I love here is that Zion is already looking. He's already seeing, oh shit, I need to be available here. And then you just see him completely erase the shot, right? I really think that a couple years ago, maybe even last year again, especially given that he wasn't in great peak physical form, he kind of lets this go, I think. I don't think he makes this weak side rotation a year ago.
Well, and
He's
for the
always been
listeners,
somebody that's like willing to go and do it, but like if he can go get the block. But a lot of the time there's been like a little bit of laziness there. Go ahead, Bryce.
I was just saying he's guarding Naz Reid for the listeners, and or if anybody watch, like, and so he has every excuse to just say, hey, I'm just gonna stay over here on Naz, and I'll be late because I'm guarding a guy that can shoot the ball. And I mean, the Timberwolves have the floor space pretty well. They have Cat at the top of the key. Ideally the Pelicans would rotate off Jaden McDaniels on the wing. BI would rotate to Reed if Ant did make a pass. But Zion could just say, hey, I got Naz Reid over here. I'm just going to stay home. But I mean, this is an incredible block on a big time athlete in Anthony Edwards.
100%. These are the kind of plays that change the way that he impacts winning. And with Zion, it's always been about like, can he up his game, not just as a scorer around the basket, but in multiple different ways to be able to help his team win basketball games. This is the second one, right? So check out this one where it's going to be against the Clippers recently. I think this one might be like around the turn of January, February, where he is defending kind of in, pseudo transition here as they bring the ball up the court. Terrence Mann. And the Clippers are sort of kind of running like a double drag where it's almost like a ghost drag from, James Harden, who's going to come through the play. And then the real screen is going to be Terrence Mann coming up. They just decide to switch this. And I just love the activity and energy again. Like he comes, he switches it, he handles it, he contains Norman Powell as a driver, goes up, blocks the shot, goes out of bounds. But a good defensive play again, where he's really moving his feet, right? Again, Zion had this tendency over the last couple of years to kind of get stuck in the mud a little bit, right? And not be able to defend in space as well as you want him to. And there are still flaws. We'll talk about one of them in a second here. But I love the fact that he's moving his feet better more than anything and being that active, energetic guy that they need.
Well, the more I've really dove into watching NBA games, watching NBA draft prospects, how you can be successful on the defensive end, just giving that second effort, Sam. NBA players are too good offensively. The rules are too in their favor. There's too much spacing. Guys aren't just going to stay in front all game long. You are going to get beat. You are going to get hung up on a ball screen. Are you willing to give the second effort? Will you continue to move your feet, stay at least on his hip? And then what can you do to be a deterrent when you get there? For some guys, that's incredible hand activity and placement, right? Like they're just great. When the offensive player exposes the ball, they attack it. For some guys like Zion, he's going to put his body on Norman Powell, and then he's still explosive enough and quick enough off the floor to block the shot. I think that's a huge part of defense. Just don't give up on the play. Continue to go with it, and you're going to be able to make an impact in a lot of situations.
And the other thing I'm so glad you brought up there are the hands, right? Zion is definitely a guy that from time to time can have low hands and not necessarily have active hands. Look at his hands here, right? The hands are out. He's trying to cut off different angles. He's trying to make life just a little bit harder. He's got his hands out still. He's low with his hands right next to the ball there. Look at his left hand right next to the ball there and Norman Powell's right hand, trying to disrupt, trying to make sure that Norman Powell knows he's there. It's just really good. Like these are the steps that Zion needs to make to be able to be that kind of true number one option at some point. He doesn't have to be the best defensive player in the world. He just can't be a sieve at the end of the day. And look, again, we're going to talk about some issues, in terms of where he needs to grow with a clip that Nekias Duncan pulled. And I think it was really, really good of Nekias to point this out because this has always been my number one concern with Zion as a defender is what does he look like on closeouts here, right? So you're going to watch the Heat come down the court. Zion right now, weak side corner of the action over there, guarding Jaime Jaquez. They throw the ball into the post to, I believe that is Bam Adebayo. They send a help man, not really like a double, but kind of a soft double, I would say. Caleb Martin here is kind of lurking in the dunker spot. So because who is that for the Pelicans? Is that Najee Marshall, I believe, probably
playing
guarding
inside the circle.
Yeah, comes over for the soft double. Caleb kind of goes into that dunker spot area. It does leave Zion like in a, 1.5 on 1 situation because Najee's kind of responsible here for Caleb. But now Najee is recovered. Bam Adebayo is here. Pretty locked up, I would say, right?
Agreed. Yeah, I would agree.
He's picked the ball up. Like, you don't need to be this tight into the paint, in my opinion, if you're Zion here. You probably should just be tighter onto Jaime Jaquez at the end of the day. I think that you can actually see the moment where his like brain kind of falls asleep if you look real close. Like you see him put his hands down
and he's
right there.
Look at his right foot. Like he was in really good squared up position and now his right foot has taken a step back. He can't explode out of this and close out right now.
Right. So as soon as Bam makes this pass here, it's just a flyby. It's just like a total flyby for Jaquez. And then they get Bam for this little free throw line floater. My God, my brain.
He just lost track of where Jaime was. He didn't even close out nearly to the right spot.
Yeah, 100%. And these are just the things that will have to come with him, right? Like he's going to have to showcase the ability to completely lock in. Even when a guy picks up the ball here, he needs to be tighter to Jaime there. There are still little things he's going to have to improve. I would say closeouts are the number one thing, just truthfully. When I watch Zion Williamson play, I'm like, you need to be closer to your man. You need to be able to close out heavily. I think that like part of what his thing is, for so long, he relied on that athleticism that was so outlier athleticism to be able to get to his spots where he's like, oh yeah, I can just close out and like block this shot, right? You can't really do that in the NBA because guys are too skilled. Like Jaime can put the ball on the ground, and then B, he can't really get there anymore. Like, and he's always been jumpy on his closeouts too, I think, more than anything. It's just like a tendency. Like he's always been, look at him jump here, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's a leap. You can't do that in the NBA. You got to step out with your closeouts in the NBA. Look, Zion's defense has been way better. I don't think that this is the best Zion has ever played. I would still go that second year. Like if you remember his second year, he was seriously just like obliterating worlds. By the end of that season.
You have the number. 27, 7, almost 4 assists, 2.7 turnovers on 61% from the field, getting to the free throw line almost 9 times a game. In 61 games.
If you look through the like stretch in the middle of the season there, like his 37 game stretch from February to May in that 2021 weird, slightly altered season, he averaged 29 points on 62% from the field.
Yeah.
He was unbelievable that season. I don't think we're quite back to that level of dominance. I hope we get there. I hope that he gets back into better condition and like we really start to see where he's capable of going. I think his ceiling is still immense. And I love the fact that we're seeing more engagement. It seems like he's really taking a lot of the criticism, frankly, to heart. And I love to see that from him. I love to see the way that he's been willing to like mature just as a human. And like, he looks like he's in better shape. He looks like he's moving better. I'm just a lot more excited about Zion when I watch Zion now.
It's interesting with Zion because I think because of a lot of the other stuff, like everybody knows the off the court stuff. Like we don't need to talk about that. Even just the crazy athleticism and the shoes and all of that. Like I think it has always gotten lost. And like what you said earlier, how talented and skilled this guy is. And I'm glad you wanted to talk about him because, I don't think we've talked about Zion all season long. His team is 5th in the West right now. We talk about how good the West is all the time. His team is 5th. Right now, he's on track to play 70 games, over 30 minutes a night. He's taken this primary initiator role. He's doing things defensively. Like he deserves some flowers and some conversation around the nuance of his game. Not just, oh my gosh, Zion is 200 and how many ever pounds and this crazy athlete. Like, no, he is a skilled basketball player with things that need to grow and improve and other maturities that still need to happen on the court, but real improvement and growth that needed to be highlighted and talked about. Real quick, if you guys are watching on YouTube, go back to the clip, that last one with the Heat. watch Jaime Jaquez subtly relocate off the ball and what that did in that situation. Is like, it's such a little nuanced thing. As Sam is bringing this up, I know we were crushing Zion for it, and he still should be able to recognize it. But watch Jaime, like watch where he's at as Bam catches the ball. So he's in the corner to start. Now Bam starts to drive across the middle of the lane. So he moves up the lane, and then watch right there. He just moves, and that's why Zion doesn't know where he's at. And those are the little things that Jaime Jaquez, even as a rookie, is good at. And one of those things I'm always looking for with like NBA draft, like off the ball players, those little nuanced movements off the ball that keep floor spacing, create shot attempts, create driving opportunities on closeouts. Those are things off ball players have to be really good at. And I just thought that was a really good example as, the other side of the equation.
I agree. Look, the Pelicans need to make something of a run this year. I think like they need to, at least be like competitive in a playoff series at the end of the day. They need to make the playoffs first and foremost. The West is just like a total buzzsaw. And I think I feel good about them making it like that. That's kind of where I'm at right now. They're a game up on the Kings for that last play-in or that last spot, like above the play-in. They're in 5th right now. The Kings are in 7th, 1 game back. They're up 2 games on Dallas in 8th. They're up 3.5 games on the Warriors in 9th. I mean, I definitely think they'll finish in the top 8 at least. The Warriors are, today notwithstanding, I thought the Warriors are coming like pretty hard. And I believe they have like kind of an easier schedule to finish the season. So that could lead to some interesting situations. The top 4 is basically set. It's going to be Oklahoma City, Minnesota, Denver, and LA in some order. Then it's that next 4 group to me, which is Pelicans, Suns, Kings, Mavs. The problem for the Pelicans, for me at least, is that it feels like they're struggling to beat good teams as much as anything. Like the start of this like really positive run to me was they win at the Blazers, they win at the Grizzlies, they beat the Wizards, and they beat the Rockets, right? Like none of those teams are playing super well. They lose to the Heat. They lose to the Bulls, which is a total catastrophe. And then they beat this like skeleton crew Knicks team, and then they split with the Pacers in a home and home. I just feel like we still really, really need to see them consistently beat good teams to feel good about them. The positive news, this next little run here, they have the Raptors, the 76ers, the Hawks, the Cavs, which is a tough one, and the Clippers, which is a tough one. But both of those are at home. And then they get the Blazers, Nets, Magic, Heat, Pistons.
And they're coming off 3 days off. I believe they played Friday. They were off yesterday, today, and on Monday. And I think the first of that stretch of games is Tuesday. So they have a little bit of time to like regroup here for 21 games left and need to be very successful. Just via Tankathon, which again, I think just takes like records. They have the 11th toughest schedule left. For reference, the Warriors are 25th. The Mavs are 24th. The Mavs dropped an awful loss today. Great win for the Sixers to keep themselves out of the play-in tournament, which I know you and I had some conversations about.
I'm just gonna have to eat that one. That was a bad one a bad take on my part that they wouldn't fall that far.
They may not though, Sam. They're still like staying right above it, and they get a few more wins like they did today. Tobias Harris was awesome. Tyrese was crazy in the first quarter, but yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. They got to play well. They got 21 games. They got to play well. Like there can be no slip up. They have these 3 days off here. Maybe they can regroup and just hit a stretch run here where they play and go rattle off quite a few in a row.
Speaking of just briefly the Eastern Conference play-in picture, can we just make it so that this season that it's just the top 8 teams get in? Like nobody wants to watch the Sadness Bowl of the Bulls and Hawks play-in game, right?
Oh,
nobody's interested in that.
I'm so in. I'm so in for the Bulls upsetting somebody, and I won't name a team because then I'll get crushed. I want the Bulls to be the 8 seed so bad. I want them to be the 8 seed so bad so they can celebrate their smart decision not to sell at the deadline.
If that Bulls team ends up beating this super fun Orlando Magic team, I'm going to be so distraught.
How brutal would that be just as fans of and this like truly it's nothing against anybody on the Bulls, anything like that, DeMar. But like, don't we all want to see both this Magic and Pacers team? Those are the two teams in 7 and 8 right now, so that's why we're using them. Don't we all want to at least see those guys in a 7-game series against one of them would get Boston, obviously. The other one, Cleveland, Milwaukee, probably going to end up being the Bucks the way they're playing, I would guess. I just want to see it. Like, I want to see Paolo and Franz. I want to see Jalen Suggs in the playoffs. Like, he's had a really good, season. I think he's played really well. You're right. That would be, I hope that doesn't get taken from us because those are things we need to see. I don't need to see this Bulls team in the playoffs.
I also do not need to see this Bulls team in the playoffs. My goodness. Basketball Genesis said revenge for the Vooch trade. Yeah. My goodness. That would be horrendous. Okay. Let's talk real quick about some of these deadline moves and what we've seen so far. I don't want to spend a crazy amount of time on this. We're a month in, maybe we'll do this again in a month and a half, but
sure.
The teams that made the biggest moves at the deadline, I think it's always interesting to kind of try and look and, see how things are going early on. Right.
Okay.
So the Knicks, I would say, we picked them as like a big winner, right?
Yeah, we did.
Deadline. Obviously the Anunoby deal plays a big part in this. Also, they go out and they get Alec Burks and Bojan Bogdanovic, moving Quentin Grimes and 2 second-round picks, in addition to some guys like Malachi Flynn, Yvonne Fournier, etc. I'm like a little bit less enthused about this, while also acknowledging like we have no idea what this Knicks team like really looks like yet, because the Knicks, unfortunately, have just been beset by injuries throughout the entirety of this little stretch run here, and it makes it really, really difficult to even understand where they sit. The fact that they are still in 4th place right now is just like crazy to me, given how difficult of a run it's been for them. I mean, they have not had Julius Randle healthy. They have not had Mitchell Robinson healthy. They have not had OG Anunoby healthy. Isaiah Hartenstein has sat out a game or two here and there. You look at like the starting lineup they had against the Pelicans in that game that, we just talked about, right? It was Precious Achiuwa, Jericho Sims, Deuce McBride, Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo. I mean, that's just like a tough go at the end of the day. They still didn't start Bojan Bogdanovic, which was very strange to me. I'm not totally sure what's going on there, why they like bringing Bojan off the bench. I mean, God, that starting lineup just desperately needed offense. You have to score points to win an NBA game. I know that's a hot take, but it's also the reality of basketball in the NBA. Then, they at least battled against the Warriors. They had Brunson that night, right? But they still started Precious, Isaiah Hartenstein, Brunson, Josh Hart, and Dante. So you didn't have Randall and OG. And those are two guys that are going to be like absolutely critical pieces of hopefully what could be like a really fun playoff push. So look, I don't know what to do with this yet. Like, it's definitely an incomplete grade, 100% to me on where this is going. But the early returns, I would say, is that, someone brought up Bojan's a traffic cone on defense. I think that's true. Like, that's definitely accurate, but I think Bojan's traffic cone tendencies on defense look way better when OG Anunoby's out there and, Isaiah Hartenstein / Mitchell Robinson are behind him.
Well, I think the hope was Bojan would get to New York in that environment, and the defense that wasn't good that we saw in Detroit would change a little bit because of what he was playing for and all of that. And maybe it's not. Maybe he's just to the age where that's not going to be the case. But yeah, I mean, you have better, when healthy, you have better rim protection behind him than what he had in Detroit. The funny thing is, I kind of called out the Sixers with the Embiid injury for dropping into the play-in. They're right there with the Knicks right now. I mean, the Knicks are one game from being the 7 seed as we record this. And I know there's games going on right now, and that'll change by the time this gets out on podcasts. But yeah, I have a hard time judging too much. I tend to like the roster when everybody's healthy. I know that's not always the way of professional sports, but you give me Brunson, DiVincenzo, OG, Randall, if Mitchell Robinson makes it back, and then that bench unit of Burks and Boyan and Josh Hart and Sean, like all of that. I want to see that before I like say that I don't. Here's the other thing, Sam. They kept flexibility. If they want a $20 million contract to trade like Evan Fournier's, Boyan Bogdanovic has that if they want it. If they don't, they have $2 million in dead money of that contract. They kept all of the significant draft capital. And so like there's like, even if it doesn't work, it's okay, right? It's okay.
Yeah.
Partly because think about all the Knicks we mentioned last episode. Brunson, DiVincenzo, Robinson, Julius Randle. They've been very smart with their contracts. So they've done smart contracts. The cap looks good. They have extra picks. And so they still have the big swing to make when they're ready to take it. If definitely going to take it when they take it.
Yeah. The second team here, the 76ers. I've loved the Buddy Hield deal. I think that is a trade that has substantially helped the Philadelphia 76ers at this point. Even in games where Buddy is not playing, just having his offensive presence and off-ball gravity has been really helpful for guys like Tyrese Maxey, particularly, who just like needs attention taken off of him. I also think it's just worth noting, like Kyle Lowry definitely fits into this as a guy who got traded, got bought out. Having Kyle Lowry, like I know that, just looking at the box score today, he went 1 for 9 or whatever.
No, he was good in that. No, I watched that game. I took notes on it. He made a lot of impactful plays, Sam. Like he was better than a 1 for 9 box score.
The game that I watched was the Charlotte game. I thought he was really good in the Charlotte game. He had like 10 assists and was really getting guys kind of all over the board and making sure that all the pieces were a little bit easy. And he takes pressure off of Maxey is the big thing. Like just being on the ball, being able to take on that secondary offensive load. It's really useful. I think that getting Lowry and Hield, if they're able to get Joel back, it does really change things for them in the playoffs. Look, end of the day, their playoff picture is solely and entirely based upon, can Joel Embiid be 85 to 95% of what he's capable of? But like, if he is that, like they have a chance to win some games, I think, and like actually win playoff series. And if I was a 76ers fan, I would be happy about what I've seen from these guys, if only because it gives them a chance at least in the next piece of it.
Well, and I think it's Tobias Harris is the X factor to me. He was really, really good today. And if he can play with that confidence, and like he had a huge offensive rebound as the Mavs were making a late run that I don't remember, somebody ended up making a shot off of it. If he can kind of do those X factor things, he guarded Luka a lot of the game. Nick Batum also like a huge factor. I was dumb whenever we did the trade deadline thing because I talked about the trade of Patrick Beverley to the Bucks. Like, man, this doesn't make sense. Why would they do this? They need him. It's like they knew Kyle Lowry was getting bought out and coming to Philadelphia. So like that was way overstated by me in the moment, just not putting all the tea leaves together, not reading them, I guess. But yeah, I thought he was pretty good today. He made multiple impactful plays in that game. Maxey went crazy in the first quarter. So no, I think you said it about Hield. You talked about Hield before anybody that I can remember. And it'll be interesting to see what his offseason will be interesting. No, Buddy Hield. Like, I feel like he's going to be a player that is going to be sought after, especially in a market that doesn't have stars. He'll be one of the better role players on the market. No?
Well, so the way I'm thinking about Hield this summer is like, let's say that the 76ers, who very clearly are in the star business right now, they're trying to go out and hunt and trying to find like somebody who can go and take them to that next level, probably a wing, right? That guy probably doesn't exist on this market. Who knows what happens in the playoffs, right? Like anything can happen in the playoffs. We have no idea yet. Maybe Brandon Ingram comes available if the Pelicans lose in the first round and they decide like that's an interesting wing type for them to go for. I'm not saying it is or isn't. I'm just trying to come up with a name based on a team we talked about earlier, right? Let's say that they miss out on all those guys at the end of the day. I think they have 3 picks, couple swaps, et cetera, that they can use. why wouldn't you just sign Buddy Hield to some massive JJ Redick like balloon contract
Sure.
that pays Buddy like $30 million a year? He's not getting that on the open market for sure. Maybe he gets like 18, 15, whatever it is. But if you go crazy and say like, hey, look, we'll give you this big number, just know we might trade you in the middle of the season. And, we love having you, but just know that like you're kind of a placeholder for us at the end
It's
of the
the
day.
Bruce Brown contract. You give him the Bruce Brown contract.
Kind of, yeah. And, they have his bird rights. They can do it. To me, it's kind of an interesting play for them to maintain that flexibility moving forward in the star market.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
It's not quite as valuable as it could have been, to be honest with you, because Tyrese Maxey is like super low capital, super high salary coming in, but it's valuable nonetheless for them, I think, because it gives them like a $30 million expiring salary on the trade market potentially, or something like that. I'm not saying exactly 30. I'm saying, 25 to 30, something like that. Go balloon payment like they did Redick.
Yep. No, interesting. And YouTube user says it might be tough for good teams to sign Buddy. So you may not even have to go to that. Like you give him the number that makes sense that you feel like you would need in salary matching in a trade.
Yeah. What have you thought of the Pascal Siakam deal to this point?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I'm not sure I want to judge it as harshly as, so just looking up since the Siakam trade, I believe his first game was on January 19th. The Pacers are 10-10, 17th in the NBA, 10th in offensive rating, 23rd in defensive rating. So that is better, but 17th in net. They have fallen to 8th in the East. But in those games, and I don't think he's played all of them, but Tyrese Halliburton just hasn't been great offensively, averaging 15 points on 45, 34. He's still averaging 9 assists to less than 2 turnovers. So whenever I say he hasn't been great, we're talking about Tyrese Halliburton standards. So I guess my vibe is a little bit more like maybe Halliburton's just kind of been in a weird spot. I believe some of those games probably were him on a minutes restriction as well. If I look at his minutes per game, less than 30 minutes per game when you put that all together. So I'm still going to give this an incomplete right now. This is definitely going to be one. Let's see what it looks like in the playoffs. Let's see how this looks. How does it hash out? How does this roster, this play style, how does Tyrese look in the playoffs? And again, this is why you want them to get out of the play-in and into a series, even if it's against the Bucks and ends up a 5-game loss. Let's see what it looks like for 5 games, 2 at home against one of the better teams in the East, and really figure out what works, what doesn't, who can play in a play. Can Aaron Nesmith play in a playoff series or can he not? Can Benedict Mathurin play in a playoff series? Can he not? What does Tyrese, Pascal, Miles look like? So I don't have any overwhelming thoughts. My inclination is he's probably helped the defense, and the offense has regressed because Tyrese isn't just playing at an all NBA level in that time frame right now.
Yeah, like part of me is like, I just want to see what Tyrese looks like here. I mean, he just hasn't looked the same since the hamstring injury. He's averaging 14.7 points, 8.6 rebounds, shooting 44.8% from the field, 34.4% from 3. That's 14 games since he's been back. It's almost, again, like not worth evaluating this until we see Tyrese like at full capacity. It's hard. Like the Pacers can't really afford to like sit him out because they're in the middle of a play-in race right now and they need to rack wins where they can. Man, I would love to see him get some rest, because at the end of the day, like, he's probably not, like, I think he has enough time to where, like, if he plays all the games, like, he has a chance to make all NBA, but like, he's not playing at a level to where he'll make all NBA right now as it is, because it just doesn't look right yet. Like he's not the same guy that he was in the early season. So I don't know, man. Like I would love to see him get back to full health somehow, but I don't know if that's even realistic at this point in the season.
Where's he at on the games played?
I think he's at 48 or 49 or so, and
he's at 48, and they have 21 left. So he has to play 17 of the 21.
Yeah. I mean, man, that sucks.
Yeah.
This is why this whole thing sucks.
Because
I've talked about that at length, but yeah.
They're 5.5 up on the Bulls. Like they have 8th at least pretty solidified. Now you could argue they should be playing. They're only a game and a half out of 4th place, right? So you could argue they should be like they could be playing to get out of the play-in tournament altogether, which is absolutely
that's
fair.
what they should be doing.
Yes,
no,
100%.
That's like the most important thing for them. The other thing is that I believe that they have like a fairly easy schedule coming down the stretch. Do you have those numbers in front of you?
Let me go right back to it. The Pacers are 12th, so they're middle of the pack.
Interesting. Okay.
Like they have the Thunder twice, the Wolves, the Cavs twice, the Clippers, the Heat, the Magic. They do get the Nets 3 times and the Bulls twice, and then 1 each Hawks, Raptors, Spurs, Pistons. But
yeah, like that to me, that feels like a stretch where they can win a lot of those like easy games and try to bank those and get to like maybe 45 wins or so, like something like that, right?
So yeah,
they're 34 and 27. You have
9 easier games against those opponents I kind of mentioned. That if you win all of those, that gets you to 43.
Okay. I mean, let's even say they go 7 and 2, that gets you to 41.
41.
And then you have these 2 games against the Heat. I believe you have two against the Heat, maybe? No, 1 against the Heat.
1 against the Heat.
You have 1 against the Cavs, 1 or 2 against the Thunder, 1 against the Wolves, 1 against the Mavs. The Magic game, I think, is, a 50-50 game. The Lakers at home is a 50-50. Lakers on the road is probably a toss-up a little bit. Maybe you're slightly underdog there. Maybe you win 4 of those games, hopefully. I don't know. This feels doable to me.
Yeah.
It feels like 11 and 10, right? 11 and 9, or whatever the number is.
11 and they have 21, so 11 and 10. So yeah, that gets you to 45 and 37.
And then the teams near you, Orlando is the easiest schedule left, so that's a problem for everybody probably. I mean, yeah,
Miami has the 3rd easiest according to this. Philly is middle of the pack. Knicks are right there by the Pacers.
Man, that's an interesting one. That's a really, really interesting one. The Suns, I mean, have you thought anything of the Royce O'Neal move so far?
I feel like he's been good, right? Like he shot over 40% from 3. They've only been 4-4 in the games he's played, but I think did I see he just returned in their game Saturday night, Friday, whenever it was. And so we've talked about this at length in terms of like, at the end of the day, you have to have those 3 guys to really make some noise. But I think he's fit in nicely. Like I think that one made sense. I like the move. So yeah, that's been good.
Yeah, I think it's been helpful for them. They needed another depth piece, and he's been like a perfect depth piece for them. Helps take on tough defensive assignments. Has knocked down 3s so far since he's been there. Like you said, 40.4% of his 6 attempts per game. Look, I don't think he's like supplanting Grayson Allen in their rotation, but he's been, pretty useful. And, I think somebody brought up the Thad Young minutes. I think the Thad Young minutes have been pretty okay as well. I don't know if they're, world ending or anything like that, but been useful at least.
Yeah, no, I agree. For a team that needed some depth, Sam, that's good.
No David Roddy minutes.
I was gonna leave that loss from myself. I thought he could eat up some regular season minutes. Apparently, I was way wrong.
No way. The Dallas Mavericks made the PJ Washington and the Daniel Gafford moves. Look, every time I've watched them, I felt like they've looked more dangerous with those guys, at least. PJ Washington.
He was bad today, though.
Okay, interesting. That's not a good sign.
He airballed 2 threes today.
Yeah, they've lost 4 of 5. And I like the way that they started, but they started with like kind of easier games, obviously. They haven't beaten anybody good yet. Like they lost to the Celtics, they lost to the 76ers at home, and then they lost to the Pacers as well since this move. I still think they're going to be a better playoff team than they are a regular season team, but it is somewhat concerning that they have not been able to string together wins, despite the fact that they've been able to, get these deals done.
Yeah, it was one game. It was today. It's fresh on my mind. PJ is shooting 30% from three since he came to Dallas, and it was bad today. Like, he got good looks. He just couldn't make them. I thought Gafford was kind of like not a huge factor in general. Like, I'm trying to watch both teams when I watch these games, so maybe I just missed it. But usually I keep a pretty good pulse on both teams and who's making impacts and he just didn't stand out. Like Derek Jones was the best role player for them today. Like, he really stood. You know who else isn't playing well recently? Tim Hardaway Jr. And I know like Tim Hardaway Jr. essentially has one job, right? Come in and get buckets. I believe coming into this game, I looked it up. He was averaging less than 10 points per game in the previous 11, and he struggled again today. Like, Derek Jones Jr. was almost perfect from the field. I think he was 5 of 5 from three. And then Luka and Kyrie were Luka had a 30-point triple-double. I think his third in a row. Only 4 players have done that in NBA history: MJ, Oscar, and Russ. And so he was incredible. Kyrie was really good. And actually the game was only as close as the score because Kyrie hit some crazy shots down the stretch. The Sixers had him down double digits mid to late fourth quarter. So it was just interesting. Again, this is the fresh game on my mind as I'm trying to evaluate this.
Yeah, I'm still interested on what they look like in the playoffs.
For sure.
At the end of the day, because they have enough flexibility now
Yeah.
to be a really good playoff team. And I'm really, really intrigued to see where it goes.
It was Maxey didn't stand out a ton today either. And I feel like they had been using him and he had been making an impact. So it could have been a bad, like, it was an early Sunday start. Like, who knows? So,
I don't know. Any other deals? The Gordon Hayward thing, like, he just got back like a minute ago. Like, I don't think we need to talk about that. I mean, no other significant ones, right?
Those are the ones I went through the whole list. Like, we had a whole outline, every team's moves and all of that stuff. I put the ones I thought made sense. The Pistons have made a ton. Like, I didn't feel like we needed to talk about that. Like, they're technically the second worst team in the NBA right now, as crazy it is to be able to say that, but we don't need to talk about the second worst team in the NBA and the trades they made, unless you want to. I don't care.
I will say, I like what Charlotte has done. We talked about that at the deadline, that I think that Charlotte particularly did a great job setting themselves up for the future.
Yeah.
And, shout out Jeff Peterson, by the way, getting the Charlotte president of ops job. When did I tell you that Jeff Peterson was the likely guy there?
I must not be in the inner circle. I don't think you texted me.
Oh, did I not tell you that? So
no, you forgot. Shocker.
For like people in the industry, I don't want to say it's been like expected necessarily, but like, he's been considered an extremely likely candidate in Charlotte almost since, Rick Schnall and Gabe Plotkin bought the team. I didn't know whether or not he'd be like the GM and the, somebody be president of basketball operations ahead of him or something like that. But it was pretty widely known that Rick Schnall and Jeff Peterson like worked pretty well together. And had like that really strong relationship, and nobody was surprised across the league, I guess I would say, that Jeff Peterson got this job in Charlotte. So congrats to Jeff Peterson. I love seeing a younger guy like Jeff get a job, and it's also just really good to see like younger, like Black executives get chances to run operations. So shout out to Jeff Peterson. I'm really, really excited to see where that goes.
Yeah, it was cool, man. I would assume, well, he is the youngest. So the first GM that's younger than me and stuff like that starts happening and you start to feel really old, Sam. But, you see an age like that and it's just like, what am I doing with my life? Like, I'm a teacher, like, what? And this dude is 35 making decisions for an NBA organization. Like, what's wrong with me? What am I doing at 37 years old? But no, it's pretty
awesome.
It's so cool, man. It's so cool.
But yeah, the moves they made, I thought were really, really sharp at the deadline. And I think that they've handled their business well. I think that bringing in Grant Williams, Grant is a guy that it seemed like, based on the reporting, it did not go super well in Dallas internally. And I think like he's a loud guy. Like if you've ever spent
Unique
time around
personality,
Grant,
right? I didn't realize this.
I wouldn't even say unique. Like he's a real, like I spent time with him pre-draft, and from
Okay.
what I know, like he hasn't really changed much. He's just like he talks, and
Okay.
he is willing to try and hold people accountable. He tries to be a leader. He's a really, it's not that he's a bad guy. He's a really, really good guy. It's just that he's loud. And if you don't have the kind of personality that, handles, that well, it can be frustrating, I think, for some people. So,
Yeah.
In Charlotte, where he has all these young guys around and they need somebody like that, I think it's actually a really good fit for him to be able to come in and probably build some confidence and be able to, kind of be who he is and be embraced for being who he is, probably as a leader, because like, I think Brandon Miller will probably accept that and like love that stuff. Having somebody that, wants to win and like wants to do things the right way, I guess is the way I would put it.
And he shot the ball with Charlotte 39% from 3 on 5 attempts, over 50% from the field, scoring 14 points a game. Like he's played well too. It's translated on the court.
Yeah, and I say all this to say about like Grant Williams that I felt like his character probably got like assassinated a little bit publicly after the Dallas thing didn't work out. I think it was just more like a fit thing where it didn't work out. Seriously, like people like, it's not like people dislike Grant Williams. He's a good guy. Like
people
it
could be quality personalities that just like this is the whole aspect of things that people don't often think about, and it's not their fault. But I mean, some locker rooms click and some don't, Sam. I tell people all the time, me and my best friend like weren't best friends when we played basketball together because we approached the game in completely different ways. I remember walking into locker rooms pregame and being pissed because his way of preparing for the game was kind of joke and loose and whatever. And I was very like serious, laser focused. I don't want people talking and, whatever else. And when that clashes, and, that's high school basketball. Like it doesn't actually matter, but that translates into college locker rooms, into NBA locker rooms, any professional sport. And it does matter, especially if it's a bigger personality and it doesn't fit well. It doesn't mean anybody on any side is a bad person or like that. I'm glad you said that because it's almost like somehow it became part of his, like he had a character flaw or some way.
Yeah,
like
no.
I even almost like now that you say it, I almost even feel like it was kind of presented that way. And so I'm glad you was like, no, it's just, he's a little bit loud and boisterous. And sometimes that doesn't click in a locker room. And sometimes young players, whatever, a young team may thrive off of it. He may be perfect for what Charlotte needs.
Yeah. Okay. Are you ready to do the most interesting part of our podcast today? The thing that I'm like most looking forward to.
You're so excited about this. I don't have a hot take here, so I can't wait to get into this.
Okay, so we're going to talk about Rob Dillingham. I truly can say from the jump here, I do not know what to make of Rob Dillingham. The swings publicly on Rob Dillingham where like people, okay, so I will start here. I am not going to have him as like a top 3 guy in this class. That I can like just about guarantee. I see people say that, like I see people say like he should be in the conversation for number 1. I'm not there on him. Anybody that has him, in that next little group, I'll hear it out at least because the talent and the like natural ball handling instinct mixed with the touch is kind of unbelievable. But then, like, for instance, you watch a game like the Arkansas game yesterday, where you look at the box score, he goes for 15 points, 5 assists, 1 turnover, and goes 5 for 13 from the field and 0 for 3 from 3, right? Everybody remembers the end of the game where he drops 11 points in like 6 minutes and looks completely dominant at the end of the game and like takes over. He was really bad for the first 34 minutes in that game. like he was like pretty actively harmful, it felt like to me, to Kentucky. And Arkansas dropped what, like 105 points or something in that game.
Yeah.
Let me pull up the number. 111 to 102. That was a piece of it. That was a piece of it. And then he goes out and drops this like incredible run at the end of the game where he looks like, seriously, he should be the number 1 overall pick, right? It's these massive swings with him where for the first 34 minutes of that game, he did not look like a first round pick, point blank. He looked like an undersized, like interesting scoring guard that like might be something long-term because you can see like the handle skill. And then you look at the last 6 minutes and it's like, oh my God, this is a top 5 guy, like very clearly. Where are you with Rob? Because I feel like the swings for people are just all over the map and I have no idea what to make of it. And then like you have the moment at the end of the, what was it? It was what game did he give up the terrible putback where he just like completely brain faded and like forgot to box out his man and like completely lost track?
I remember we talked about last time the straight line drive he gave up to like
LSU.
Okay.
It was LSU. That I'm talking about. And then Gonzaga completely unplayable on defense in that game against Gonzaga. Like they had to take him off of the court for big swaths of that game because Gonzaga repeatedly ran screening actions right at him. And then he has like other games where he looks like he's, again, quite literally the best player on the court. So I give it to you. Where are you at?
So just real quick, where I have him on my board, I have him in the late lottery range, maybe as high as 10 or something like that. So I have not at any point in this cycle had Dillingham in the top 3, in the top 5. I've kind of just played around in that group of, anywhere, I may have had him inside the top 10. Right now I have him like 10 to 14 in that later lottery because of his size. And I want to ask you about his playmaking in a second, but I have notes on his defense. Remember we talked about with Zion, that second and third effort defensively, and Rob is young. He does not give that. I wonder if he can guard, but he does not understand right now the multiple efforts it takes to be a good defender. We talked about on the last episode, Reed Shepherd. Reed Shepherd got lost off the ball late in that game. He got lost. He straight up lost his man on the weak side who hammered to the corner. But Reed turned, made a second effort, and was able to recover and block the shot, and it turned into a positive defensive play. I just don't think Rob has that in his game right now. I have notes from the Tennessee game, Sam, where like the entire scoring package was on display, like we saw at the end of this game. But for every bucket he gave up, or he gave one up to Ziegler on the other end. Dillingham is a prospect that when people talk about how bad the defense is, it's not overstated. I think sometimes people overblow some of this stuff, like the limitations with players. It's a real issue. So my question, I guess, with Dillingham is, how much of a bucket is he at the next level at his size? And how much of a playmaker is he at the next level? Because if you can tell me he plays with the ball in his hands in the Kobe White, Tyrese Maxey, Darius Garland, before Spida, obviously, archetype of player, I'm still a little bit more intrigued, even with how bad the defense is.
So yeah, skill. Let's talk about the offense first, because like the skill is just so readily apparent, right? And then we'll get to the defense, even beyond what I said. Offensively, I get it why people are excited about him. He plays at very real speed. Like that's the thing. He is fast and he plays fast. Like when people talk about like wide receivers, right? You're a football coach, so this will be fun. When people talk about wide receivers, they like kind of talk about like play speed. Do you catch through contact and continue to explode? I saw this clip going around just even at the combine, right? Of Keon Coleman and Troy Franklin running the gauntlet drill, where it's you catch, you flip, you catch, and then you run, right? And you catch the balls like coming from each side of the field. Keon Coleman ran like a straight line, ran at 23 mile per hour, 22 mile per hour, or something like that. He ran like a 4.640. And before he did the gauntlet drill, people were like, oh my God, this guy is like running this like terribly slow 40-yard dash, right? Maybe he's not a first round pick, whatever. And then Troy Franklin, who ran I think it was like a 4.440. His top speed on the gauntlet drill was like 17 mile per hour. It was much slower because as he catches the ball, he's like swaying back and forth like across the line, right? So the play speed is different. And then like there were other factors, like when you watch Keon Coleman, and this is just me like watching wide receivers, right? Like he looks kind of stiff through his hips to me when I watch him. Whereas like Troy Franklin looks a little bit less stiff, like looks like he can flip his hips, like do some different things. I'm not here to tell you which guy's a better receiver. I'm just telling you like the mechanics of the process of trying to evaluate these guys as receivers, right? Rob Dillingham plays with that real speed. He'd be the guy that is, he might not be as fast, from end to end of the court as the fastest guy in the league. But if you tell me he has the ball in his hand and he's able to make moves and like there are defenders trying to stop him, that's the real speed that he plays with. He's able to play at an elite level with the ball in his hands as fast as anybody, I think, in college basketball, certainly. His handle is super creative. It's sudden. It's shifty. Clearly has like unbelievable hips in terms of his ability to like get in and out of his moves. Really good at being able to use the threat of his shot and his touch, I think, to get an attack off of closeouts, to get to where he wants to. I think he brings so much to the table as an offensive player that is so intriguing. I love to watch him on offense. I think he is like a truly fantastic offensive scoring prospect. And then, he has a great floater game. He has potential to finish above the rim in transition, maybe not necessarily in half court situations all that often. I like how creative he is as a finisher kind of around the basket.
Yeah.
Even though I don't think it always translates again to, efficiency around the basket. Like if you look at his last 7 games, he's shooting 45% from 2-point range, right? Which is not a great number necessarily, but he consistently knocks down shots from 3, consistently has real touch at the basket on floaters, and then has that creative mindset around the rim. I think what people see, and this is where I'll toss it to you, is that this type of game translates at an elite level toward him playing in better spacing where the driving lanes are going to be bigger. The court is going to be a little bit wider. There are going to be better shooters around him constantly, and you can make things work that way. I just threw a lot out there. What are your thoughts?
No, I agree. Like, you've said it, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but he might be the best offensive prospect in the class. Like, I think he has real playmaking. I thought he had some nice passes. I think he uses eye manipulation at times. I think he can run a pick and roll and read those things. I think it may even be better than what we give him credit for because he doesn't always get to operate with the ball in his hands. There's times where Reed Shepherd does it. There's times where DJ does it. So it's not even that we just don't get to see it as much as what we could. So I don't think I have a whole lot of questions. Like there is some questions with his size, I guess, finishing around the rim, right? But I think he's going to have the floater game. And I do like some of the finesse and creative finishes he has around the rim. And you have to have those things and think, even if he's just thinking in that way, even if it turns into being something else. I think what it comes down to is Rob Dillingham's value is going to be determined by where can he get defensively, and is where that at, how much does it matter? You know what I mean? Like how much does it matter? Because
hold.
Okay.
We're pocketing the defense for a second.
Oh, my bad. Sorry.
Because I want to interrogate how good he is on offense. So somebody asked in the comments, what is the difference between him and Kyrie? I think Kyrie is probably the best ball handler that's ever lived. I think Rob Dillingham is like a great ball handler.
And,
Uh,
and at the rim,
Ky-
Kyrie was.
yeah. So Kyrie played 11 games at Duke. He averaged 17 and a half points and shot 53, 46, 90. Rob Dillingham's good. Rob Dillingham is shooting 47, 43, 71. The finishing at the rim is just like nowhere in the ballpark. And the ability to like handle, honestly, like Rob is one of the guys where like you might be able to make a case of it like being in the same stratosphere, but it's not in the ballpark, I don't think either, in terms of Kyrie's handle. And that's not a statement on Rob's handle. That's a statement on Kyrie being genuinely maybe the best ball handler that's ever lived.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the finishing at the rim. Like, so yeah, I think somebody said Garland. Where was the Garland? Darius Garland with more scoring.
Maybe. I get why somebody would say that. I think that's like I'll hear that out on some level. I think Darius has always had better vision. You go back to lower levels, I think he's always kind of had that.
Do you have questions about Dillingham's creation then? Because like I feel like I'm a little bit buying the ability to run a pick and roll to create along with score than maybe others, and that might include you. Like maybe you don't buy that as high of a level. Maybe
I think he can score for sure. I think Garland became like a phenomenal, like triple threat, player out of those situations where, he can drive and get to the floater. He can really drive and kick and pass and, hit lobs to guys like Jared Allen and things like that. I don't know that I ever quite see that with Dillingham because he's always been so scoring focused throughout the course of his career that I don't know that he'll ever kind of like hit that like passing threshold. But maybe like to me, he's more of, people brought up like Malik Monk and Lou Williams. Like it's more of that to me. Malik has always been like a freak show athlete that I think is like way undervalued in Malik's case. Like I can't remember if Malik Monk did a dunk contest or not, but Malik Monk like unequivocally should have done a dunk contest at some point. He's like so physical and like strong through his lower half, whereas Rob is like quite skinny. So they're different, but like to me, it's more like Lou Williams. Like Lou is the comparison to me with Rob.
Yeah, and I actually think Monk passes the ball, like at least current Malik Monk with the Kings. Like I watch games and I'm like, man, like he's actually creating for teammates and passing the ball, you know, decently well. So
yeah. So somebody brought up Brandon Jennings. Like Brandon Jennings is a good name, I think, for Rob Dillingham. And I think again, like people look at Brandon Jennings and remember, probably wasn't worth a top 10 pick, everything like that. Brandon Jennings like was top 3 in rookie of the year, and then he tore his ACL. Like, I can't remember when he tore it. Might've been like 4th year, 5th year, something like that. But like Brandon was pretty good for a minute there and like was very clearly like an NBA caliber player. I think it was maybe his 5th year where he tore the ACL and he just like kind of wasn't the same after that. But if you look at Brandon's first 5 years, he averaged 16.7 points, 6 assists on 39, 35, 79. The efficiency wasn't great, but if Rob can be like a slightly better Brandon Jennings offensively, that might be okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think then it comes down. Well, I know we got to talk the defense still. So yeah, no, I think we're similar with the scoring. I think I'm a little bit higher on his passing, which makes him a little bit more valuable on the offensive end before we get to any of the other stuff.
Yeah. So let's do the defense.
Okay.
I think he's the worst defender as a guard I've evaluated.
So somebody asked real quick, what about like off the ball?
Bad.
And that's the thing, right? Is like, even if you can make rotations, if you can be a playmaker, a pest, like some of those things, he averages just over 1 steal a game in 23 minutes. But I have some positive notes that are like, like he will get up and guard at times, or maybe can make impacts, but it's like, it doesn't make up for all the liabilities. It's not like he's always rotating to the right spot and communicating and those type of things. That's kind of what you need him to do if he's going to be hunted with mismatches and kind of struggle on the ball, especially.
There are a few moments where like he'll really get up and guard somebody on the ball.
Yeah.
And like he very clearly has the quick twitch like speed to stay in front and be able to like make life miserable for that person. He doesn't do it often. And I think he's horrible in screens. Like I think he just the problem is that second and third effort, like you said, if he gets behind the play, he just quits. It feels like when I watch him. If he gets behind the play, he's just like going to stop playing kind of deal. And that's what needs to improve. Like, frankly, that's something that could improve in the next week.
Yeah.
Like just play harder. If you get clipped on a screen, try and fight back, like get back into the play. Do that. And like you drastically increase your chances of playing more minutes in the NCAA tournament. Like him personally, like Kentucky wouldn't be able to take him off the court in that case. And B, you increase Kentucky's chances to win a title. If you would just give second and third efforts fighting over screens consistently, it would be a huge benefit, I think. It would be an enormous benefit, I think, to Kentucky.
Yeah, and the thing is, he doesn't have like the size, but he does have some of the physical tools just with the speed and those type of things and some of the twitch to do that, like to get back in the play. And maybe it's not blocking a shot, but maybe it's he continues to chase behind. And when that ball handler exposes the ball, then he gets his hand there and he knocks it away. So yeah, we'd go, man.
Or just like make him feel you and like cut off the angle, like going backward a little bit. Like
yeah.
There's just different ways to go about it. I think like giving that second and third effort gives the offensive ball handler a lot more to think about. Even.
Yes. Yeah. You just put a little pressure on him. You make him feel get into him a little bit. If he goes into his floater, get a hand in one passing lane. Or passing window. So you take that option away. So now he only has this option. And if a teammate is in that passing lane off the ball, now he's limited with his options and then he makes a mistake. So I really, again, I'm sorry to the listeners. I know I always come back to the Pistons, but Jaden Ivey has done this in his second year in the NBA. He was awful. Jaden Ivey was awful defensively.
But Bryce, here's the thing. Jaden coming into the NBA
was better than this.
Levels of magnitude better than what Rob is.
And has better physical tools just with his size.
Yeah, and I'm not even saying like Jaden was a good defender at Purdue. He was good. I thought he was best at Purdue at like guarding off the ball and like fighting through screens and like navigating.
Sure.
Like I remember a game against like Max Christie where like he, had to navigate like all sorts of off ball actions and like kind of shut down Max for that game. Right. He was okay on ball when he wanted to be. He got clipped by screens a little bit too often and like didn't know how to navigate them. But like he was levels better than where Dillingham is coming in.
So like what I'm saying is, but he has learned in his second year in the NBA to make those second and third efforts. And now you see him get clipped on a ball screen still, Sam, but then make another effort and he gets back in the play and he blocks a shot. And so that's where, again, Rob doesn't have the size and, isn't going to elevate the way Jaden Ivey can, but just getting back in the play. And so my point was, you said it earlier, he could learn this a week from now. He could learn it during the pre-draft process whenever teams critique him. Maybe he learns it during his rookie year, or he could never learn it. Like maybe he never picks up on it. But I will say that like there's a chance that some of this gets, I think your argument will be it still doesn't get him to neutral, but at least it's a little bit better than what we're seeing right now.
I think there's very little chance he ever gets to neutral, even on the ball, because he's so small. Like he's just so thin, like through his lower half. I think it's going to be really hard for him to he might be able to deal with the smaller guys. Like I think there's a real value to him being able to deal with the smaller guys, to be clear.
Sure. Yeah.
But in the playoffs, like anytime you're going up against like these big apex wings, you're even going up against like Kyrie or somebody like that, who like just really knows how to operate in a ball screen scenario. I think it's just going to be really fucking hard.
Well,
I think it's going to be really hard to deal, like to even like get him. He's coming at such a deficiency navigating screens from a physical perspective. It's really hard to imagine him getting to a neutral level on the ball.
I'll tell you, Sam, I've watched it be an issue for Marcus Sasser. And what was Marcus Sasser's reputation
and
as
Marcus
a defender?
Was unbelievable on defense at Houston.
And he just gets some matchups where the offensive player doesn't even feel him. The offensive player will bully him to 12 feet, and then he just rises up and jumps over him. And it's not Marcus's fault. And I'm not even doing this to critique him or saying he's still going to be a really good NBA player, but it's just a sheer size thing. And to your point, Sasser played at Houston, is older, stronger, all of these things on top of it. And I've even noticed it with him, even in his first how many ever games of his rookie season. And maybe he'll figure it out. Again, hand placement, hand activity, defensive schemes and some of those things help. But you got to be, it's tough. It's tough for small guys.
It's really hard for small guys at the next level. That's why it's worth being as critical as we're being here on this, because NBA teams are going to be as critical as this. This is a big thing for him. Off the ball, it's I think worse.
Yeah. Which is scary, right? Because at least you could say I enjoy when I can put in a scout good team defender, right? I think Matas Buzelis is going to struggle on the ball, but he's a great team defender and has crazy length, right? So it's not quite as big of an issue. Dillingham, God, if he could be good off the ball, that would help so much.
Yeah, and he's again it's engagement. He just loses engagement off the ball. That's the reality. He just does not stay engaged off the ball. In that LSU game where Tyrell Ward got him for the putback is the perfect example of it. There's just not another way to put it. That's what a lot of his defensive tape is like. It's hard, man. He gambles a ton. He mistimes digs. He just loses track of his man completely off the ball. If he's in the weak side, he's small. So if he's weak side, backside corner, he can't really tag and then stay attached to his man in the corner. If you put him on a shooter, right? It's going to be too easy, I think, to take advantage of him off the ball. And oh, by the way, the instincts aren't even totally there off the ball for it to be effective.
Yeah. I mean, it's, again, as you said, I'm sure people are going to not be fans of us going in on this, but it is important and it does matter. And
no, it really matters.
There's
he's an unbelievable offensive player.
Yeah.
Truly an unbelievable offensive player. One thing worth considering here is we talked about what if they put back no defensive 3 seconds. Does that help him more?
Sure, because that
where he could just stay attached a little bit more and not have to worry about this. Does it make it just easier for teams to defend, and thus these guys won't have to stay as 1000% engaged all the time on defense in a way to make it work? That's something that teams will have to consider in the draft.
Well, I think it also matters who you have behind him in general, right? The defensive infrastructure. What does I just see it in the comments? People talking what does the team need? I think someone made a good point. He could end up being, a guy that gets minutes, or I think Chris said gets stuck like Bones Highland. He gets on a team who has the defensive infrastructure around him, but can really use his ability to get buckets, which at the end of the day is value. And that's why we're talking about him still as a lottery pick, is because he is so good offensively. That could provide a ton of value to the right team, who yet again has the right pieces to protect him on the defensive end, or can feel like they can grow him and develop him on the defensive end to get neutral and develop the schemes, right? Steph Curry got really good. Every little guard I watch, I want to be watch Steph Curry and how he hedges ball screens so he doesn't get switched but that's a team-wide thing. Then whoever's using the ball screen has to be willing to navigate it. And like, it's a commitment from everybody. And the Warriors are committing to it because Steph is so good offensively. Is Rob Dillingham going to be so good offensively that the 14 other guys and the coaching staff and everybody else is going to be willing to commit to navigate, or the scheme of every ball screen be, okay, Rob's going to hard hedge here, stick with his man so he doesn't get switched out? Like, those are all questions you have to ask before you draft Rob Dillingham.
Yeah. And look, like right now, I think he's like pretty comparable to like Cam Thomas defensively. Like I think Cam Thomas is so bad defensively, even still, that like it's hard to have him on the court. Cam Thomas is averaging 20.9 points per game this year. And if you look at any impact metric, like Brooklyn's effectiveness as a team like falls off a cliff when he's out there. He is, to me, a far more interesting prospect offensively than what Cam Thomas is, to be clear. His passing, his speed, his touch, and his ability to shoot from three, I think makes it easier for him to be able to make a high level impact on offense in the NBA. But man, it's going to be hard. Like you better have the right team infrastructure to make it work. And if you do, like it'll work. Like Malik Monk has worked, and Malik Monk like works hard on defense now. Like he at least tracks back and does everything like that. But to me, like, and look, like Rob is ahead of where Lou Williams was at this point in his career. Like if you look, like Lou Williams averaged like 4 points per game in each of his first 2 NBA seasons coming direct out of high school, right? I think Rob's a little bit ahead of that. But that's, you know, the zone you can fall into really easily if you're somebody like this, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I think what a lot of people will do is they'll hear the names are thrown out and they'll go, well, those guys are still top 3 picks. They're still, like, we're talking top end outcome. Like, what if the offense doesn't translate? What if the passing isn't what I think it is? I've seen some people question his overall feel. What if the feel isn't good and all he is a scorer? And I think that's why I'm more comfortable into the lottery than top 3, is because yes, the ceiling outcome offensively is amazing, even with the defensive limitations. But what if he doesn't make those offensive outcomes with those defensive limitations? Then you're really struggling to find a role for him. It's definitely coming off the bench as just a, 7th man bucket getter who, you can only play so many minutes, and come playoffs, it's even less, right? So there, we talk comps and outcomes. You have to consider the risk reward of what happens if they don't hit that. What if something doesn't play out? And with all of these guys, right? Like with every single player.
I think the NCAA tournament for Rob Dillingham is going to play an enormous role in where he gets picked. If it's to the point where Cal feels like I can't have him on the court, and there have been moments this year where, like the Gonzaga game particularly, it's felt like Cal feels like he can't have him on the court, it's going to be harder.
Yeah.
And those are high leverage, really important games where everybody's watching. That will hinder him. But if he goes out and just like completely wrecks, which I think there's a chance of it because he's so good offensively, he could really jump and like really help himself. I don't know where Rob Dillingham is going to get drafted. Like I'm somebody that does this professionally, and it's almost like not worth projecting right now. Like it's really anywhere from like top 5 to just outside of the lottery. Like if it goes poorly in the tournament where Cal feels like it's a struggle to play him. I think Kentucky is as talented as any team in the country. And I think Cal, frankly, probably needs to like live with the defensive issues that he brings to the table. I think getting a Vecenie has helped, at least from like a rim protection perspective. He can only play probably like 15 minutes a game in high leverage moments, but like having him around has been useful. Them willing to go smaller, which is something Cal has been averse to throughout the course of his career. Like they finished that game with like all of the freshmen over the weekend against Arkansas, with like Wagner and Reed and Rob and Edwards, like all on the court.
Yep.
That was super interesting to me. Continue to do like stuff like that. I'm truly fascinated by Dillingham. Like I don't I don't really have a dog in the fight, I guess, with Rob. Like, he's not going to be one of my guys that like I really feel like awesome about. Like, for instance, like Reed is definitely a guy like I feel really good about. Um, but like I get it. I get the appeal for people, even if I think they're just like real concerns here.
Yeah, no, I feel like I'm the same way. And again, like I think we want all these kids to succeed, but you know,
100%. Yeah.
like at the end of the day, it's our job, especially your job, to evaluate them the best way we can unbiasedly. And as you said, this matters. The defensive side of the ball matters, especially for him and his size. Kentucky's fascinating. Like I've kind of shifted my mindset a little bit recently as we're getting closer to this. Is who do I think is going to win the tournament? Who would I pick if I fill out a bracket? Those type of things. Kentucky's like a sneaky team I just really like, and I'm like, man,
Yeah.
guards win in the tournament. They have some that can really go. They have an older one that can go. They have all of these different guys at the center position they can rotate in. Justin Edwards has seemed to figure it out a little bit. He's playing better defensively. He's making some shots. Also, like, it was really interesting to watch how happy his teammates were for him at the end of that game when he made some huge buckets. Finding my way back in on Justin Edwards a little bit. But they're a very, very interesting team come NCAA tournament.
Yeah, legitimately like awesome basketball team. I think they are a really, really good team. I mean, look, like I don't know, I wouldn't have them in my top tier of teams that can win the tournament, but I would probably have them, you know, in that next little group just from an upside perspective. Like I would have Houston ahead of them. I would have Connecticut ahead of them for sure. I don't know what I would do with Purdue in them. Like Purdue similarly is like exploitable for, you know, a 1 game sample, I think. Arizona, I'd probably have ahead of them.
What about Tennessee?
Tennessee, I would probably have ahead of them. I know the Rick Barnes factor that people will yell at me about, but I think their offense is just like leaps and bounds ahead of where it's been previously.
And you have a guy that could just take over for we've seen it happen quite a bit. Marquette.
Yeah, so like Rick has had 1 top 20 offense before in his time at Tennessee. He's had 1 top 30 offense before, looking at the numbers here, and they've been good whenever they tend to have that. They made the Sweet 16 that year. I think it really makes things different. Marquette look like they need to get healthy. I don't know what to do with them. You know,
both those guys did.
And
I think Oso did too, right?
Yeah. So like that was always going to be a mess. Yeah. Like I'd have Kentucky like in the Marquette tier for sure. I really like Creighton. I think Creighton's going to be a really tough out.
Yeah.
Like they're playing really, really well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kentucky would be in that group though for me.
Cool. Yeah. It's going to be fun. I mean, it's always fun. I love those first 4 days. Those are best 4 days of the year. So
I agree. Okay. That's all I've got. Do you have any other things you want to get to?
No, I put some other guys in here, but we'll save it. So I wrote down just some guys that were interesting.
Let's do this real quick.
Okay.
Do you like Isaiah Collier or Rob Dillingham more?
Oh, it's getting closer. I will. So in complete transparency, I have them in the same tier with Dillingham ranked ahead of him right now. But man, Collier has been so good since he came back. What is this? His last 7 games, he's averaging over 20 points on 48% from the field, 36% from 3, getting to the free throw line almost 8 times a game. Even the assist to turnover ratio, 4.1 to 2.1. I think there's way higher potential for what Isaiah Collier could be defensively. I could see myself getting back into Collier over Dillingham at a certain point.
Yeah, I have them really, really close.
Yeah.
Collier is also not a very good defender.
No, he's not.
A little bit better.
But I think the potential is better just based off size alone.
I think so too. He needs to shoot it though. Like
yes.
You know, Rob's offensive ceiling is way higher than what Isaiah's is.
That's fair. True. That's true.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one, I think. But Isaiah has been fantastic since he's been back, and you know, Isaiah could have very easily shut that shit down.
Yes.
after, he gets hurts
on a
the
bad
wrist
team
or whatever. Terrible team, right? And he decided to come back. I really respect the fact that he decided to come back.
Yep.
And he's been great. Like you said, averaged over 20 points in those 7 games.
Can I ask about Rich Paul's comment, or do we want to leave that alone?
Go ahead. I don't have a lot to say about it, so go ahead.
No, I just it's exactly what we talked about. Like, you can't tell us to shut up about it and then you bring it back up.
Say what the comment is.
I don't remember what it was. Something about the 2024 draft decisions can be not based on position, but based on team. I don't remember what it said. But I was like,
yeah, so he was
a week ago
basically
you
saying
told us to shut up about it.
Yeah. Rich Paul basically said that Bronny will weigh his entry into the 2024 NBA draft based on specific team interest, not draft position. So basically, Rich is going to try and find a team to promise him in the second round. He won't really care about him going in the first round is basically all he's saying. That's fine. That's the way that Clutch has done business for years upon years. I don't really have a problem with it, to be honest with you. To me, I'll just be interested to see if they can get a team that really loves him and is actually willing to invest significant resources in him.
No, I don't have a problem with them doing it. Agency the way you want to agency. I do not care. I'm just saying, you just told us a week ago to shut up and stop talking about him being an NBA draft pick and let him play college basketball. And then this comes out randomly the other night. That's the only thing that struck me as okay, come on. So that was it. They can agent however they want, whatever they want to do. If they can get him to the NBA, I didn't have a problem with that. It was just you just told us not to talk about it.
Also true. That's kind of annoying. In fact, it's quite annoying. The other thing is, what's more, Paul said, the right team doesn't necessarily equate to Bronny James landing on a roster with his father, although LeBron James would be head over heels excited if that were to happen organically, Rich Paul said. Look, sure, you guys might be thinking that way. They probably won't be thinking that way. It's fine that you think that right now, and that can be part of your decision-making process, but it's not going to be part of the team decision-making process. So you guys have to live with that on your end, I guess. Somebody asked, is Bronny a better prospect than Chris Livingston? Honestly, right now, I don't think so, truly. And I didn't really like Chris that much last year. And I think the reason that Livingston gets brought up is because Livingston, is a Clutch, client that entered the draft last year after averaging 6 points and 4 rebounds. And the, Milwaukee Bucks ended up taking him and giving him a real contract, which, Chris Livingston right now in the G League. Let's take a look what Chris Livingston is doing. Put it this way, he hasn't come across my radar in watching the G League this year, and I've probably watched more than most have. Livingston is averaging 14 points on 49, 37, 50 with 8 rebounds. Those numbers sound okay on their face, but they're not in the G League. That's nowhere near call-up range. That's you need at least 1 more year, maybe 2 more years in the G League if you ever get there numbers.
Yeah. No, I don't have a whole lot of Chris Livingston takes right now.
Yeah. And by the way, Chris Livingston, I believe, has next year guaranteed on his deal. I think that's the way those deals work now, and then has $0 guaranteed beyond next year. So Chris Livingston got $3 million guaranteed. Great. Bronny doesn't need $3 million guaranteed.
Yeah.
Bronny is making real money in NIL. He's always going to be an interesting person for brands to work with. And on top of it, his father is a billionaire. So, the value equation there is probably quite different for Bronny. Yeah, I don't know. Bronny will spend 2 years in the G League, at least. So I wouldn't want to do that if I didn't have to, if I was him. I don't know. We've spent too much time on this. We spent way too much.
Sorry, I shouldn't have brought it. And now have you seen the Brunson clip yet?
I haven't. Is it bad? And do I want to watch it?
I don't know. I can't tell. He was definitely hurt. He was definitely in a lot of pain. Sucks.
So yeah, Jalen Brunson, for people who don't know, Jalen Brunson just hurt his ankle, didn't look great.
I think it was his knee.
You're saying knee. Some people said ankle, I guess. I don't. Brunson didn't appear to roll over his ankle or knee or anything. Didn't seem like anyone knocked him. Seemed like a non-contact injury.
So just based off, it looks like it's on the takeoff, like when he planted to go into his jumper, because he kind of, I don't want to speculate. I'll leave it there. So yeah.
Hope that
yes.
Hope Jalen is okay. Is where we're at on this show.
Absolutely.
Bryce, tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people what's going on.
Yeah. So at Motor City Hoops on Twitter, more and more NBA draft stuff, Piston stuff, general NBA stuff. If you want some just raw notes, like I copy and paste my raw notes scouting report from just notes I've taken throughout the season at the motorcityhoops.substack.com. Check it out there. Or I get game notes. Like I watched that game today between the Sixers and the Mavs. I took 3.5 pages of notes for game theory. Whenever we talk about those teams, I just put that on the Substack for you guys to read through. It's just literally raw notes. Like some of it doesn't even make sense. It's bullet points, but check that out. And then here at Game Theory with Sam, talking hoops, favorite part of my day. Don't tell my wife.
We'll be back this coming week with a little bit more. Go to The Athletic. Keep me employed over there. I'm just doing draft guide stuff right now to get ahead of the game for this coming draft cycle. That's all I've got right now. I might try and do a top 100 this week to get my thoughts together, but that would require quite a bit of work on my end. We will see. That's it, though. Until next time, we'll talk soon.